Hi, welcome. I'm Gina Mathias, the Sustainability Manager for the City of Takoma Park, and I welcome you to our Everyday Biking Seminar. We are hosting this seminar with the Washington Area Bicyclist Association because we are running a transportation challenge. It started on May 19th and it runs through October 19th. And we are challenging anyone who lives or works in Takoma Park to get out of their cars and to bicycle, walk, and to use public transportation more for their daily errands. Tonight we will be learning more about how to bicycle safely in the city, and with us we have Daniel Hoagland from the Washington Area Bicyclist Association to lead the conversation.
Thank you, Gina. Good evening. Thank you for having me. As Gina mentioned, my name is Daniel Hoagland. I am the Programs Director at the Washington Area Bicyclist Association, better known to many people in the region as WABA, because it's both easier and more fun to say. WABA is the region's oldest and largest bicycling advocacy organization. We serve not only Prince George's County here in Maryland, but also Montgomery County, District of Columbia, Arlington County, Alexandria, and Fairfax County in Virginia. We are a multi-state regional bicycling advocacy and education organization. Our goal is to make biking better wherever we happen to be and wherever people who bike happen to be. What I'm doing here tonight is to talk to you about how to take bicycling and incorporate it into your everyday life. And the reason we phrase it that way is because a lot of folks, whether they bicycle recreationally or whether they walk or they drive cars or take transit, see bicyclists as something that they would never figure out or be able to do. And my goal here today is to let you know that you can do it. You can take on bicycling as a way to get around town. And it really helps just to think about it as just that. It's nothing special. It's nothing that makes you different or unique. It's just another way to get around town, just like walking, just like driving, just like taking transit. And that's how I think about WABA's goal and mission, is to make bicycling around town as normal as walking, as normal as driving. And it's tough to say that we've achieved that yet, but we're getting there. We're making big strides. Bicycling has increased greatly, and we're working with local governments to change laws and change streets to make it easier and more accessible for everybody. So, getting into the meat of what I'm talking about today, a lot of people think about folks like this when they think about people who bike every day. People who kit out their bicycles with large amounts of gear, like the guy in the upper left there, maybe the gentleman in the lower left with the aero helmet trying to break all sorts of land speed records on his way to work. And then over on the right-hand side we have a bike messenger. Not quite as common a sight on city streets these days, but at one time they were sort of the face of bicycling to a lot of folks. When we talk about everyday bicycling, we talk about people like this. People who ride because it makes sense for them, people who ride because it fits their needs, people who ride because it fits their lifestyle, people who ride with their children, ride with their parents or siblings, people who ride with their coworkers, their church groups, their book clubs, and on and on and on and on. People who ride because it's just the way they choose to get around town. Maybe that means it's not the right choice for every single trip. Maybe that means you're not biking to work every single day. But when it makes sense for you, getting on a bicycle should be normal, should be fun, should be easy, and should be safe. I'm glad Gina mentioned the bike challenge. I'm going to send a challenge out to everybody here today. And that challenge is to change the way you think about bicycling, to get yourself on a bicycle, or get your bicycle ready to go, and to get out and ride at least once over the course of the next week. So buy, rent, borrow a bicycle, use Capital Bike Share if you're more inclined towards that, and just make sure that you are happy to ride it. So don't go when it's raining, don't go when it's too hot. Make sure you have someone fun to ride with so you're looking forward to it. Take a friend, take a spouse, take a child. Children make bicycling a lot more fun. And just get on them once, just once, and see if you can recapture that feeling from when you were a kid, when bicycling was amazing, when it was fun. I ride every day because it is fun. I don't do it to lose weight. I don't do it to save money. I don't do it because I have some thing to say about the environment. I do it because it's fun and because it gets me where I'm going. And I think that that is just as good a reason as any of the others. A couple of stats about health. I'm not going to read them all, but just the things I want to mention. Bicycle commuting to work burns an average of 540 calories per hour. That's not nothing. That's an extra beer at happy hour. That's an extra scoop of ice cream in the evenings. That's the ability to take yourself a little bit less seriously when it comes to what you do. And then the one I particularly like to highlight is that women who exercise 30 minutes a day or more are 30% less likely to develop breast cancer. This is a significant stat because we at WABA have a vested interest in getting more women to bicycle. We have a program called Women and Bicycles, which is designed specifically to encourage women to talk to other women in their peer group about bicycling. It's an incredible program, and I always try to find a way to work it into whatever I'm talking about. So take a look at it, Women and Bicycles. If you haven't heard of it yet, you should definitely get involved. When it comes to personal health, the beautiful part about everyday bicycling is that it lets you build in a little bit more exercise into what you're already doing. You already have to get from point A to point B, whether that's from home to work, whether that's from school to church, whether that's from the movie theater to the bar. You still have to get from one point to the next. And so if you do it on a bicycle, you get to build in a little bit more of that activity. You're not sitting down. You're not fuming in traffic. You do lose the ability to sort of, read a book or listen to an audiobook or whatever, but small price to pay for getting out in the wild. A couple of myths just to bust, because that's what we do. We sort of get the truth out as far as and wide as possible. You don't need to spend a lot of money to get on a bicycle. You don't need to have the fanciest, latest, expensivest, sleekest gear to get on a bicycle. You don't have to be super fit triathlete to get on a bicycle. You can carry whatever you need. Whatever you're carrying to work in any given day, there's a way to get on a bicycle. Some of those ways may be more expensive than others, and I'll get into that in a moment. But there's some way to do it. I can guarantee you that. And you can also get where you need to go. There's a challenge, a sort of a subsidiary challenge here that I'll get into in a moment about trying not to think like a driver. But there's a way to get where you're going. Whether it might be a little bit longer, might be a little bit more pleasant, but it is going to be there. You can show up looking good and not necessarily covered in sweat, not necessarily with your hair messed up. There are definitely strategies for that as well. And most importantly, and probably the one that I should underline here, is that you can show up safely without having to be concerned, not only having to not be hurt, but not be concerned about being hurt. So as I mentioned, our mission, WABA's mission, is to make biking in our region a safe, normal, popular form of transportation, and to start seeing biking everywhere. And we truly do mean everywhere. Biking, if it's going to be as normal as walking, it needs to be as available as walking. And that means that every street that has a sidewalk should be bikeable safely. And that's going to require a real contextual shift in the way that we think and talk about our communities. For our kids to feel safe bicycling to school on any given street, we need to make those streets safer. In some cases, that may involve removing a lane of travel. It may involve slowing traffic way down. It may involve building specific bike-protected facilities. It may mean just thinking about how we want to prioritize the way people move around in our towns and cities. Not to get them out of cars necessarily, but to make sure that when the car is the right choice, people are choosing the car. When the bike is the right choice, people are choosing the bike. To do that, we need you. We need you to accept my challenge and get on a bicycle and ride, even just once, so that you can think about it differently, so that you can talk about it differently, so that you can put some context to what other people are talking about when it comes to changing the way people bike or get around Takoma Park. Getting into the more practical side. First things first, you have to get yourself a bicycle. It could look like this one. This is out of someone's basement, and clearly it's been used as a decorative place to hang lights and make sure that Ivy has something to climb on. Guess what? This bike is almost certainly still rideable. A little tender love and care, maybe a couple of new parts, greasing the chain certainly, but it wouldn't take a whole lot. The beautiful part about bicycles is that they are resilient machines, and they can almost certainly be made to ride again, no matter what's been done to them. But maybe you don't want to deal with a used bicycle or the bicycle that the previous tenant left in the basement of your house, so you want to get yourself a new bicycle. This is where things can get intimidating. There are as many varieties of bicycles as there are fish in the sea. And the really tricky part is to find the bicycle that is right for you. And that is a loaded word, right. The right bike for you is not necessarily the right bike for him or for her or for anybody else. And it's going to take some time. It's going to take some trial and error, most likely, to find that right bike for you. The way that we recommend you take this on is to ride as many different bikes as possible. Your local bike shop will allow you to test ride bicycles, and you should take liberal advantage of that. They often require you to hand over a credit card or a driver's license as collateral, but then you can take a bike around the block. You can see how it handles. You can take it through its paces, shift up, shift down, make sharp turns, start and stop, and really get a feel for how the bike's going to operate. This is invaluable because if you're not incredibly happy, if you're not looking forward to getting on that bicycle, you're just not going to do it. There are easier ways in this day and age, unfortunately. There are easier ways to get around. And so if the bicycle itself is not making you excited, then almost nothing else will. Pardon me. I put this huge variety up here not to intimidate folks, but to show you just that there is some bike for you, whatever your needs are, whatever your desires are. For most people, it's going to come down to a few choices, specifically for their first bicycle. These are the three we recommend the most. In the top left is what's known as a hybrid bicycle. Does anybody know why it's called a hybrid bicycle? Over here?
Because it's a mix of styles.
Yeah, it's a mix of styles. It blends the features of a road bicycle with the features of a mountain bicycle. Specifically, from a road bicycle, it takes smooth tires. It takes gearing more suited to flat terrain. And from a mountain bicycle, it takes a more upright posture, so that when you're riding it, your head is up, your chin is up, and you're better able to see and be seen. One of the other benefits to both this bicycle and the one right below it are that they usually have plenty of opportunities for attaching things to the bicycle: fenders, racks, lights, bottle cages, etc. So you can carry all of your stuff with you. The bike in the bottom left is what's known as a city bike or a roadster, sometimes a Dutch bike, although there's a different category that also meets that description. It's pretty similar to the hybrid, though it doesn't have as many of the sporty features, and often the gearing is more relaxed, which means it might not have as high of a top speed. However, for city riding, you're probably not going to care a whole lot about that. I mean, if you do, great, but if you don't, this bike is the bike for you. And then on the right, you have the ubiquitous red bikes, Capital Bike Share. This is a question we get a lot. Are you guys responsible for those red bikes at WABA? And we, in a way, we are, in that we advocated strongly for them and helped to make them as effective as they are. But we don't operate them or have any control over what they do or how people use them. That being said, the Capital Bike Share program is an incredible benefit to biking around this city. It makes biking easy, it makes biking convenient, it makes biking affordable for a lot of folks. The way it works is simple. You can take a bike from any one location and you can return it to any other location throughout the entire network. This makes one-way trips not only possible, but the standard. So if you're biking to work and you know there's going to be a thunderstorm, like every day in July, in the afternoon, you don't have to worry about it. You can bike in the morning and take the bus home or do whatever you like to get home. If you decide to meet friends for a drink after work and have one too many, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to bike home that day. You can take a cab. It makes for a lot more convenient ways to get around. They're also really heavy bikes, which sounds like a detriment until you realize that that means that they are also very sturdy bikes. They give you a sense of steadiness and weight to the way that you're getting around town that a hybrid or road bike will not have. And that can be really invaluable for new bicyclists to feel that confidence and that steadiness to them. A couple of features on there, you might not be able to see it in this picture. They do have kickstands, they do have lights built in, they have a front rack that you can put whatever you want into it. They have 3 gears, they have a bell, they have a fenders and a mud guard across the back so you're not going to get wet or your skirt or coat is not going to get pulled into the back wheel. Really the only thing that's missing is a cup holder. So what do you actually need before you can take on bicycling in a real way? It really comes down to just 5 things. You need a bike that feels good and makes you feel good. You need to have a bike helmet. This is a matter of some debate. I'm not going to open the floor up to questions on bike helmets just yet, but in my opinion, in WABA's opinion, you need a bike helmet. You need front and rear bike lights. This one, less debate. These are required by law in most states, including Maryland. You need a bike bell. This one not required by law, but a really good idea, because a bell is the best way to signal to people that you exist, to say, I am here and I am using this space. And that lets people know that they should not use that space. Has its own downsides communication-wise. You can't necessarily distinguish between a bell saying, hey, I'm here, pay attention to me, and a bell that says, get out of my way, you slow pedestrians. So a bell, you want to use it for that first purpose and not for that second purpose. A bell is not to tell anybody what to do. It's to basically say, I'm here, don't hit me. And then finally, a bike lock. We recommend a U-lock. I'll get into that in a moment, but a lock that will keep your bicycle safe and secure while you are away from it. That's really it. There's a lot of things you can add on to that depending on your purpose, what you're doing that day. I like to always carry a cell phone just for directions more than anything else. Some people will never leave the house without some spare cash or a toolkit or whatever it is. But for most city riding purposes, this is what you need. I would say start here and contextualize whatever you're carrying depending on what you're doing in that day. Next step, figure out who you can turn to for help. There's not a single bicyclist in the world who didn't have questions about bicycling at one point in their lives. And I'm sure many of them would say finding somebody to answer those questions is a critical part of enjoying your bicycling, your time on a bicycle. It doesn't matter if that person is the person sitting next to you here in the room. It doesn't matter if that's the person in your office who always shows up to work in bike gear. It doesn't matter if that person is your neighbor who you see out in the front yard tinkering on a bicycle every day, or every weekend. It doesn't matter if it's me. You can call me and ask me questions. As long as you know what that resource is and how to get in touch with it and figure out the answers to your questions, you're never going to feel like you are out on your own out there. The bicycling community here in the Washington, D.C. region is robust. It is very friendly, and it is very eager to help new people get involved. And I really encourage everyone to take advantage of that. And if you don't know where to start, just come to WABA, come to one of our meet and greets or happy hours, or just shoot an email off to WABA. You can send it to me, you can send it to education@waba.org, and just ask those questions away, and we'll get you in touch with folks. Next, to go somewhere, you got to know where you're going and how to get there. So planning a route is a critical skill for bicyclists. This is something that, again, you learn by doing to some extent, and also by forgetting. A lot of us learn to get around by car, first and foremost. And what I like to recommend to bicyclists is to try to step outside of that driver mindset. You're not going to want to take Rhode Island Avenue on a bicycle if you can avoid it. There's another way to do it, using side streets, using trails. There's a way that's going to be more friendly to you, safer perhaps, more fun to ride, which is my biggest thing, is finding the route that's going to be the most fun and give me the most joy to get to work every morning. Maybe it'll be shadier in the summer. Maybe it'll be sunnier in the winter. Maybe it will allow you to go by the river or see some kids playing or whatever it is that you want to get out of your bike ride. Plan a route that helps you do that. You're not locked into the Massachusetts avenues, the Florida avenues, the Kenilworth avenues of the region. You can get out of that pattern, and I really encourage you to do so. There are maps over on the table there of both Takoma Park and the Washington, D.C. bike map. The D.C. one is nice because it goes outside of the borders a bit. You see some Virginia, you see some Maryland, and it includes bike share stations and facilities in those regions as well. But Google Maps up here in the top left corner, that's your real friend there. There's a special bicycling filter or layer you can enable on Google Maps that will wash out all the road colors and incorporate all the bicycling colors, which are all different shades of green. And when you pull that layer up, you can really see how bike-friendly our region is and how easy it can be to get from point to point by bicycle. Pardon me. And finally, you can really change the way you get around by thinking about bicycling not as the point-to-point transportation, but as just one piece of the puzzle. So you can put your bicycle on a bus like this person is doing right here and use the bus part of the way. You can drive your bicycle to a midway point, a park and ride, or a mall parking lot somewhere that's not going to get ticketed, and you can bike the rest of the way. You can walk to a bike share station and then walk from a bike share station. You can and should think about bicycling as one of the many things that you can use to get around town. And so any combination of that is good. And more importantly, from our perspective, any of these combinations that involve bicycling makes you a bicyclist. You're no less of a bicyclist. You're no less a part of our community. You're no less able to benefit from the work that WABA does if you only bicycle part of your way or if you only use Capital Bike Share. Your voice is just as valuable, and more importantly, your safety and joy and accessibility for bicycling is just as important. This is more for bicycle commuters, who I usually give this presentation to, but if you're biking to work, figure out what your office has to offer, or maybe it's your building that has to offer the benefits to bicycling. Everything from locker rooms to showers to secure bike parking can really make a difference in your enjoyment of your ride to work. Access to places to change, to shower, even just to do a quick bird bath with wipes or something like that can really be the difference between showing up to work a little bit looking like you rode to work in July and showing up to work looking fresh and clean. And once again, because this is what's most important to me personally, is make sure that you do have fun. Enjoy yourself. It's the best part about biking to work. And it's something that I've only noticed that bicyclists can say is that getting to work is the best part of their day. All right, some Q&As. I gave this answer already in the presentation, so I hope you were paying attention. Are you legally required to have lights on your bicycle? All together now? Yes. You are legally required in Maryland, and the law is not quite as simple as yes lights, no lights. You're required to have a front white light on your bicycle. That is a front-facing light that is white. You're also required to have either a rear red light or a rear red reflector. And the law says those two things are equivalent, and that's not quite true. I would rather say that they both have their benefits, but they're not necessarily equivalent. Lighting, the benefit of lighting is that it's active. You turn it on and it broadcasts your location to the people around you, which is really helpful whether they have lights or not. So pedestrians can see lights. Pedestrians cannot see reflectivity because reflectivity only works when a light is shining on it. So if you're only decked out in reflective vest, reflective gear, but no lights, pedestrians won't be able to see you. Drivers, however, who shine lights wherever they go, assuming their lights are turned on, will be able to see you very well with reflectivity, better than with lights alone on your bicycle, in fact. So the best way to do it, if visibility is your priority, the best way to set yourself up is to have both reflectivity and lights in your kit. Okay, I didn't mention this one, so this may require some guesswork. The average new bike commuter loses blank pounds in their first year. 5. Good guess. It's actually a trick question. It depends. It depends a lot on how far you're going and what's on your bicycle and what type of terrain you're encountering. The real answer is some number greater than 0. You're going to lose some weight, and that's not nothing. Whether it's a part of your fitness regime or whether it's your entire fitness regime, you can't really go wrong. Where do you bike when there is no bike lane?
Far enough to the left that you won't hit car doors.
Outside of the door zone. Good answer. So the door zone, I think there's actually a question about this. We'll just skip that one when we come to it. The door zone is the area immediately to the left of parked car doors, or on a one-way street. It can also exist on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side. It's about 3 to 5 feet wide, depending on the length of car doors. Some car doors are extremely long. And it is not overly difficult to stay outside of the door zone, provided you are comfortable riding in the center of travel lanes. And this is a comfort. I mentioned comfort because it is more about your comfort level than it is about safety. The curious thing about drivers is that drivers are trained on how to deal with slow-moving traffic. They do it all the time for construction vehicles and slow-moving trucks and disabled cars and horses and buggies sometimes. Whatever drivers encounter that's going slow, they do the same thing. They slow down, they wait until it's safe to pass, and then they pass, and then they get back into the lane. There's no reason why they should treat bicyclists any differently from any other slow-moving traffic. And one of the ways that you can ensure that that is what happens is by staying in the center of that lane. When you ride off to the right-hand side, like the gentleman in the narrow lane, the rightmost gentleman bicycling there, what you're telling the driver, what you're communicating to the driver by that road position is that it may be safe for them to squeeze by you. They don't know, you don't know, but you're giving them enough space that the option is on the table. And that means that they might take it. And that means they might put you in a bad situation. They might put themselves in a bad situation. When you're riding the center of the lane, like the gentleman who's farther up ahead is, you're communicating something different. You're saying to that driver, there is no way for you to pass me safely in this lane. It's not going to happen. So, you can treat me like any other slow-moving vehicle, or you can make a really big mistake. Most of the time, if you take that choice away from drivers, they will behave exactly as you expect. 95, 99% of the time, they will slow down, they will pass you. They may not be the most polite about it, but they will pass you safely, and they will get back in their lane. I mean, I'm sure that this happens with people other than bicyclists, but drivers do make mistakes sometimes too. So I can't say it's a 100% guarantee of safety, but I will say that when you go out and you ride in this way, you make it easier on drivers to not make mistakes, and that avoids a lot of issues. Oh, here we go. What's the door zone? I guess I just gave that one away. It's the area directly to the left of parked cars. Special notice for what we call door zone bike lanes. A lot of times, traffic engineers, either because they don't have the ability to move the bike lane farther out from the parked cars or because they don't know that it's a bad idea, will create bike lanes directly in the door zone. Usually something like 50 to 75% of the bike lane will be in that door zone. So what do you do in those scenarios? Well, I recommend that you just ride the outside line of that bike lane and that you use the bike lane as a guide rather than a place where you are supposed to be. Bike lanes, while they are dedicated infrastructure for bicyclists, because they're just paint on the ground, they have some drawbacks. And one of those drawbacks is that other people will use them, whether it's double parked cars or people opening doors. You will encounter obstructions in a bike lane. So whenever you're using one, you should be ready and willing and able to move out of that bike lane at any time, whether that means into the traffic lane or whether that means getting onto the sidewalk or simply getting off your bicycle entirely. You should be comfortable and capable of doing that. WABA is working to build more protected bike lanes, which is a different category of infrastructure that avoids this scenario entirely. How do you tell people you're turning on a bicycle? Hand signals, right. Unlike cars, most bikes don't have automated turn signals. My boss, when he does this presentation, he has a helmet that has turn signals on it, so he gets really... We're not going to talk about that. No, you use your hands, and that is a really clear and obvious indicator about what you intend to do. So if you want to go left, you point your hand out to the left with as much authority as you can muster. I'm going that way. If you want to go right, point your hand out to the right with as much authority as you can muster. I'm going to go that way. Now there is a turn signal that also means right turn. Looks like this. It is legal. It is less clear, in my opinion. This one could easily be mistaken for, hey, how you doing? It can be mistaken for going up for high five. It is ambiguous in its intent. And only folks who have made it a point to memorize the DMV driver's manual will remember what it actually means. This one is clear. I'm going that way. Expect me to go that way relatively soon. You can also use your signals to signal other things, the most common being stopping. Either hand pointed down like this is a signal for stopping. That's one that a lot of bicyclists know, but not a lot of drivers know that one either. There's also a symbol like this for stopping that they use in Europe sometimes, which is again confused with right turn in the United States. For lane changes, I'll often point at the lane I'm going to. Oh, and you should feel free to add motion to those signals whenever you want to. So if you're going right, I'm going right. Like, just make it visible. Make it as obvious as possible. Throw a little jazz hand in there. Whatever you have to do to make sure that the drivers or road users around you know what you're going to do next. Because predictability, second only to visibility, is what's going to keep you safe. What is a bike salmon? Any ideas? A bicyclist swerving across a road? That's a good guess. No. A bike salmon is a wrong-way bicyclist. Somebody going against the stream. This is something that is illegal for starters, But it's more importantly than that, it's also a really bad idea, primarily because it puts you in a position where people are not looking for you. Let me try to paint a word picture here. If you are entering a one-way street, and let's say you need to turn right to go with the flow of traffic, you're going to be looking to the left for oncoming traffic. So if a bicyclist is using that one-way street in the wrong way, coming from the right, you're not going to be looking that direction. You'll be looking over here, and when you turn, you're going to be in direct conflict with that bicyclist. So that's one scenario where bike salmoning can put you on the wrong side of a traffic conflict. But in general, it just creates more problems than it solves. More effective to go around the block. Are bicyclists required to stop at stop signs and lights? This is, again, an it depends answer. It depends on where you are. In many jurisdictions, there are laws either in progress or about to be introduced that may change this. The only state that has passed a law like this is the state of Idaho. And they have a law in the books since the 70s that says that bicyclists can treat stop lights like stop signs and can treat stop signs like yield signs. And they've been running this essentially grand traffic social experiment for 35 years and have seen no traffic apocalypse of people getting into crashes or increase in any kind of fatalities or injuries. They're just one state without a huge metropolitan area, so obviously take them with a grain of salt. And no other states have followed their lead yet. But it's becoming more and more common for this type of law to be introduced. In D.C., we have a modification to the stop signs and stoplights, mostly stoplights, sorry. And that is when the stoplight is red but the walk sign is on, bicyclists can proceed as if they were pedestrians. This is what's called the lead pedestrian interval. It allows pedestrians to enter a crosswalk prior to cars getting a green, and that allows them to not be impacted by turning drivers. And so by allowing bicyclists to use that same advantage, it's usually 7 seconds or so, or 5 seconds, it allows bicyclists to get out in front of cars and establish their space in the road without feeling like they need to jockey for position with something that outweighs them by a ton or two. But without those caveats being accepted, all bicyclists are required to stop at all stop signs and stop at all red lights. Not just expected, legally required. How much money does the average bike commuter save? If only, right? Andrew Jackson. This is another trick question. It depends. Depends on how often you decide to take it on. For some people, they're going to save a lot of money by getting out of their cars or even selling their cars. I know that the Car Free Challenge is happening here, and even if you make the change just one day a week for the rest of the challenge, you're going to see a significant savings. Not that should be the only reason you choose to bicycle, but it certainly could be a contributing factor. What do you do if it rains or snows or even the dreaded thunder snow? Well, stay home if you want to. Take the bus, take a car, telecommute. Same thing you would do if there's any other reason that you couldn't get to work for whatever reason. You can and should treat bicycling as one more tool in your toolbox. And that means that when it's not the right tool for that day, you leave it in the toolbox. You do something else. Just because you've decided to be a bicyclist or decided to make bicycling part of your everyday lifestyle doesn't mean that it is literally an everyday choice. No one's going to take away your bicyclist card and tear it up in front of you. So do what you need to do to keep yourself safe and happy and comfortable and warm, I suppose, if it's snowing. How should you lock your bike? However it's effective is the real answer. We have a card over on the table there that is all about locking your bicycle. It's designed to be as minimalist in language as possible, so it's all visual depictions of what you can and cannot lock your bicycle to. The sad fact about bike theft is that it happens. It happens all the time. I don't know what that means. Okay. Whoops. We're just going to ignore that and pretend it didn't happen. Bicycles get stolen. It happens. It's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. You cannot prevent 100% bike theft, which is why it pains me to say that your job as a bicycle owner is to make your bike less stealable than the one next to it. It is a zero-sum game out there. If your bike is not stolen, somebody else's is probably going to be stolen. But you can make your bike less desirable. You can make it less of an attractive choice. And that comes down to a couple of things. The lock you choose should be as expensive and as heavy as you can afford and carry. There's a direct proportionality to cost and weight when it comes to security of your bicycle. So don't be tempted by those flimsy locks you see in the aisle at Target. Instead, go to your local bike shop and ask for the heaviest one they have, and then work your way backwards from there. Lock it in a place that is going to be lit at night, that's going to have eyes on it in the day. A place with high foot traffic prevents thieves from having the privacy they need to go after locks and try to take them out. Use multiple locks if you can. This is obviously overboard, but use multiple locks if you can. And if you can't, you can get a cable that will attach the parts of your bicycle that you cannot lock to the lock itself. You should always try your best to lock both wheels and the frame at a minimum. Unfortunately, bike thieves are mean and will take just things that they can't even use, like seats and helmets and saddlebags and stuff that doesn't even sell. They will take those stuff just because they can. So if you have stuff on your bicycle, you should make it removable as best you can so you can take it with you when you go. Can you bike on sidewalks? It depends. Good. You're catching on. It depends a lot on the local jurisdictional laws wherever you happen to be. So my best advice is to look them up and find out what they are. I always get it wrong in Maryland. I know that Prince George's County and Montgomery County have opposite laws, and I get them mixed up. So I'm not gonna even try because I'm gonna get it wrong. But in the District of Columbia, bicycling on sidewalks is allowed, except within a very small prescribed area that is called the Central Business District, which is roughly south of Massachusetts Avenue, north of the mall, west of Union Station, east of GW, for better or for worse. It's like a triangle. Within that area, however, there's also an exception that you can ride on the sidewalks on the National Mall itself, because the National Park Service views its sidewalks as multi-use trails, not as sidewalks. So it's sort of the exception to the exception. Odds are pretty good if you're biking downtown in DC, you're never going to encounter a police officer who has any idea what you're talking about when it comes to sidewalk laws and the Central Business District. But you should know, and you should take advantage of, or you should know, and you should not take advantage of their ignorance. Instead, behave as if somebody who knew what you were doing was always watching. The one exception I have to that, and there's exceptions to exceptions, it's all contextual. One exception I have to that is on Capital Bike Share, because many of the stations are on the sidewalks. You may have to ride a bit on sidewalks just to dock and undock, but you can always get off your bike and walk it. How do you treat pedestrians? This is not much of a trivia question. How do you treat pedestrians like the kings and the queens of the roadway? Be kind, be courteous, go slow. If you are sharing sidewalks with them, if you're sharing trails with them, understand that pedestrians have the right of way for all intents and purposes, not legally, but they do have the right of way because they are more vulnerable, because they are more likely to make mistakes, because they're not paying as much attention. None of that makes them wrong in any respect. It just means that you as a bicyclist need to be aware of that and need to pay attention to what they're doing. In some cases that will mean slowing down, may even mean stopping and getting off your bicycle. And yes, that is annoying, but it is worth it because if you were walking, you would want the same respect and treatment from bicyclists. What on earth is a box turn? It's diagrammed right there for you. It's what we call a two-stage left turn. So if you're riding as a bicyclist, as a vehicular cyclist, which is sort of the technical term for what I'm talking about in a lot of these respects, you'll be riding on the roadway, and if you want to make a left turn, you would treat it like you would in a car. You would merge to the left, you would signal your left turn, and when the light turns green, you would turn left as if you were driving a car. In some cases, either because of roadway design or because it's just not safe, you don't want to do that. Instead, you can use what's called a box turn, or occasionally it's called a Copenhagen left, or a two-stage left, a multi-stage left. And it's really easy. Those are all complicated terms for a really easy way of doing things. You simply stay in the right-hand side of the right lane. You stay where you would be riding normally if you were going straight. And you cross that first street when you have the green light, and then you stop at the corner. in this case the northeast corner, and you reorient yourself so that you are facing the other direction you actually want to go. You wait for the lights to turn. When it turns green, you proceed across the second street. It takes a little bit longer, yes, but it doesn't present any other difficulties. And it actually makes for, once you get it down, it makes for a very smooth way of getting around town. Should you wear a helmet? My good friend Al Roker asks you this question. Yes is the answer. You should. Do you have to? Not if you're over the age of 16 in Maryland, you don't, but you should. And this is why. Because you can ride as safely and professionally as you possibly can, and you can not make any mistakes for as long as you're on a bicycle for any length of time. But you cannot prevent other people from making mistakes. You can discourage them, but you cannot prevent them. And when other people make mistakes, you can still be the victim of those mistakes. And when that happens, if that happens, hopefully it won't ever happen, but if it's happened to me, so when that happens, the helmet is what's going to take that crash and take it from something that could kill you to something that probably won't kill you. And that is worth it in and of itself, in my opinion, for hat hair and a little bit more sweat and, looking like a dork, whatever that means. Helmets also have come a long way from the days when they were the worst thing in the world. They are stylish to some extent. A lot of them have cool patterns, and there's one that looks like a watermelon, and there's just a lot more variety to helmets these days, and you can find one that fits your style. You can find one that matches your bicycle. You can find one that makes you happy to put it on even. So if you're thinking about bicycling, I really cannot encourage you enough to get a helmet. If you don't wear it once in a while, the sky's not going to fall and the world's not going to end, but it's just a smart thing to do. Also, you never know who might be watching. Kids, new bicyclists, people who look up to you, maybe looking at you and watching what you're doing, and you want them to take you as a role model. Secondary question, how do you make sure your helmet fits? At this point, I have a helmet. I can adjust it for everybody, but I didn't bring one. It's not as complicated as you might think. There are only 3 steps, and I'm going to teach it to you all the same way I teach it to the 6th graders so that I can be sure you're going to get it. So you use your eyes, your ears, and your mouth, and we call this the eyes, ears, mouth method. When your helmet is on your head, just imagine that I have one on here. You want to look up with just your eyes, and you should be able to see just the brim of the helmet, the dark line of the helmet. If you can't see anything, your helmet's too far back. If all you can see is helmet, your helmet is too far forward. You want to adjust it back so that just the edge of it is visible when your eyes are looking up directly above you. Secondly, the straps, which usually form into 2 triangles, should fit around your ears so that your ears come through the triangles. And that's an easy way to use your ears to check that. If the triangles are way down here, then your helmet is not fitted correctly. You need to adjust those sliders up so they're just underneath your ear. And then finally, mouth. When the helmet's buckled, you should be able to talk and breathe and use your mouth just like you normally would without any change or issue or complication. But you should also be able to feel the strap at all times. It shouldn't be undetectable. And when you open your mouth really wide, you should be able to feel the helmet press down on the top of your head just slightly, just enough to know that it's there. And I guess the final thing is that there's usually an adjustment mechanism around the back that you can tighten or loosen as needed to fit the circumference of your head. And again, a helmet should be snug. It should be detectable. It shouldn't be so loose that you don't know it's there. But a lot of helmets these days are very comfortable and very light, and so after a little while you will forget that it's there, even if it's fitted correctly. This is more of a plug than a question. Where do you go to become a confident city cyclist? It's WABA. Go to WABA. We have a wide variety of educational classes for bicyclists of all skill levels and confidence levels. No matter where you are on that spectrum, when you come to one of our classes, you're going to walk away feeling better about your bicycling. You're going to have more skill, more confidence, and more ability to talk about bicycling to other people around you. So you can pass that skill on, and you can pass that confidence on to your family, to your church, to your coworkers, to random strangers you meet on the road, whatever it is. All right, so remember that challenge? Here it is, restated as homework. So it's a challenge and an assignment. Find your bike, get a bike by hook or by crook, get it ready to go. That means making sure that you know your route. It means that you've figured out who your resources are. It means that you've gotten the tires pumped up or pumped them up yourself. It means that you are ready in every respect. You have your helmet, you have your lock, you have your lights, you have your destination, and then get out there and ride. 2 miles or 2 minutes, doesn't matter. Get on a bicycle, ride around the block, ride circles in your driveway. As long as you're out there and riding, you're going to want to do it more. And that is as close as I can come to an actual guarantee. And make us bicyclists look good. We don't be like this guy. We at WABA benefit directly when bicyclists are riding, whether they're riding in Takoma Park or riding in Lorton, Virginia. Bicyclists help us by making sure that we all benefit from the safety and numbers effect. We all benefit from people thinking and talking and experiencing bicycling, and bringing it back to their communities, bringing it back to the conversations they're having at offices, city halls, and wherever they happen to be. So we thank you at WABA. I thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to take any questions, comments, or concerns. Question?
I have a question.
Sure. Do you want to use the microphone? These are just some sample questions. You don't have to ask those ones.
So I notice when I am on Sligo Creek Trail, one of the many bike multi-use trails in the area, that a lot of cyclists opt not to use it and they ride in the road instead. What are the advantages and disadvantages of choosing to ride in a roadway versus on a bike multi-use trail?
That's a really good question. First, we benefit in the DC region of having some of the world's best, or the country's best anyway, multi-use trails, and they are a great network, and they really can provide a way to get around. But it's worth remembering that first and foremost, they are recreational facilities, and they are recreational facilities for people, not just for bicyclists, but for people of all stripes. You'll find dog walkers, you'll find kids, you'll find people in mobility assistance devices. And when you're using a trail as a bicyclist, you have to remember that the trail isn't for you. It's for everybody. And that means changing your behavior. Like I said earlier on sidewalks, that applies doubly so on trails. When we see bicyclists riding on the road that parallel trails, to some extent, that means that they're taking this responsibility towards other trail users very seriously. And they want what they're looking for out of their bicycling experience, something the trail cannot provide. Oftentimes that means speed. It means that they want to go fast, either because they're training for a ride or a race, or because they're riding with a fast group, or in any case, they're riding in a way that they wouldn't be able to do it on the trail and still maintain that safety for other users. So those bicyclists are people that have really taken their responsibilities seriously, and I kind of wish we saw more of that actually around the region. That's a really good question.
Have you ridden the Klingle Trail yet?
I have not ridden the Klingle Trail. This is a new trail that opened in DC. I was on vacation until literally yesterday, from when the day it opened until yesterday. So I haven't had a chance, but it's my first thing that I'm going to do once I didn't ride a bike today because I didn't want to be sweaty. But it's the first thing I'm going to do when I get my bike out tomorrow.
I have a technical question.
Sure.
So if you're on a narrow road and you're approaching a traffic light and there's a string of cars and there is a small strip on the side where you can kind of weasel your way up to the front of the line of cars, should you do that, or should you stay further back where you can be in the middle of the lane and maintain kind of your position in the center?
That's also a really good question. This is a practice that's called lane splitting, and it is something that is not inherent to just bicyclists. You see it with motorcyclists too, particularly on freeways. And the answer to the question whether it should be done or not done is going to be dependent on the context a little bit, but it also depends on where you happen to be. In the District of Columbia in DC, that practice is legal for bicyclists. But even where it is legal, it can still result in the perception that the bicyclist is doing something wrong. So while individual bicyclists don't have to be concerned necessarily about the perception of their behaviors, at WABA we have to be very concerned about that. When bicyclists are tarred with the same brush, by default, unfortunately, it seems. When one bicyclist does something wrong, that's taken as justification to dislike all bicyclists. We have to be very aware of how we are perceived and the way that we encourage people to ride is perceived. So while it is legal, it's something that I don't necessarily recommend for most riders. It has safety concerns as well. Those scenarios you're talking about where there's a line of cars stopped at a light and there's a line of parked cars, they're usually rife with potential conflicts, whether that's somebody getting out of an Uber in the mid lane, or somebody jumping out the sidewalk because all the traffic is stopped and they don't want to walk all the way to the corner, or car doors opening on the driver's side of the parked cars, or somebody getting in and out of parking space. There's a lot of different and/ors there that could impact that small space you have available to you. So what I tell to people who are considering that course of action is, if it's legal to do it, and you are comfortable and capable of dealing with any conflicts that arise from it, and you're comfortable and capable of handling yourself when traffic begins to move again, if you're stuck there, then yes, you should feel free to do it. But be aware that you are still also playing into that perception that bicyclists are scofflaws, because even though it's not against the law, it is perceived as being against the law. And so that's a really complicated answer, but it depends. My personal calculus is more along the lines of, if the line of cars is, say, greater than 5, I will often lane split. If the line of cars is less than 5, I will often take my spot in line and wait. But that's more of a as I encounter it rule.
Why is the Metropolitan Branch Trail not fully connected?
The short answer is politics. The long answer is that advocacy takes an extremely long amount of time, even under optimal circumstances. We have the Metropolitan Branch Trail fully approved, fully funded. It is going to happen from Union Station to Silver Spring, completely off street. The question of when those last segments are completed, it could be decades for some of them, unfortunately. And this has to do with all sorts of different things. Some of the properties that have the space the trail needs, we have to wait until they turn over and the easement is exercised to get access to that space. In some cases, there were long-standing disputes between the owners of the railway tracks and the owners of the adjacent properties. DDOT fought with CSX over the space between the current end of the trail and Fort Totten Metro Station, for instance. That only was recently resolved. That section is being constructed right now, actually. Dealing with the Maryland government and the Montgomery County government for the Maryland section took a lot of doing. DDOT is moving forward currently on what they're calling Phase 2, which is Fort Totten to Blair Road. And it's in design phase right now. They're doing neighborhood community outreach on it. So it has to do with a lot of how things get approved in the various processes. There's a federal environmental assessment process that can take 3 years at a minimum. In this case, it's taken more like 12 years just for certain parts of it. All these other issues that I've already mentioned, it's a trail construction is a really fraught process, because unlike a building parcel, there is often not just one owner. Unlike a building parcel, there's usually all sorts of different crossings to deal with. So is the trail going to go over a road or under a road, or is it going to be an at-grade crossing? How is that going to work? Is it going to be signalized? Is it going to be crosswalk? Do they need to change the signage? Do they need to worry about the throughput on the crossing road? It gets really complex really quickly for these new trails. The good news is that one of our latest projects, the Capital Trails Coalition, is working at a much higher level to connect trails across the region. And we've brought together 30 different stakeholders, municipal governments, groups like Rails to Trails Conservancy, state governments, a couple of construction companies even, to talk about how we approach trails as if they were a holistic network that serves the public good rather than a series of disconnected recreation facilities. And that's already yielding big dividends. We have a trail gap map that identifies the prioritizations for what we should be focusing on. and we're able to get everybody, this is led by us in National Park Service, we're able to get everybody to agree on what needs to happen for the first time. And then how it happens and when it happens is a different question altogether, but if we can agree at least that it needs to happen, that's a really big first step, and something that hasn't happened in the region before. Sure.
First one, passing etiquette. I am usually the one who pass because I'm slow, but if that were to change, I were to pass another biker.
Okay.
One is best practice because I see bikers passing me and do very different things.
Mm-hmm.
They do that in terms of announcing themselves. And the second question, if you all have like a recommended self-bike repair something.
Okay.
Yes.
Two very different questions, but very worth asking. The first on passing etiquette. So there's three parts to it. The first is that when you're passing, your first priority is to keep yourself safe. So you want to look behind you for oncoming traffic. You want to look ahead of you for traffic in the opposite direction, whether you're on a trail or on a sidewalk or on a roadway. The next thing you have to worry about is the safety of the person that you're passing. Not much of an issue in a car, but significantly greater of an issue when you are passing a bicyclist or a pedestrian. And the two things to remember with the safety of the person you're passing is to give an audible signal, as audible and as often and as early as you can. So in many cases that means ringing a bell, and it means ringing a bell maybe when you're 5 bike lengths back, 3 bike lengths back, 1 bike length back. You want to make sure that the person understands what's happening. And hearing one bell one time without any indicator of distance is not going to necessarily give them that understanding. But if they hear more than one bell, because of the way the human ear works and the way the human brain works, they will intuitively interpret bell, closer bell, as something approaching them. That's just, you can take advantage of human evolutionary biology that way. So an audible signal, and a bell is just one example. You can use a horn, you can use a buzzer, you can use your voice. The second is that when you pass, you need to be doing so at a speed that is slow enough that if something goes wrong, you can adjust or stop. And this is where a lot of bicyclists get it wrong, is they do not adjust their speed to account for that. And so when something does go wrong, when you say passing on your left, and the pedestrian only hears the word left, and they step to their left, right into your path, that's what we're trying to avoid. If you're going slow enough and that happens, you can stop. You can swerve, you can say something else to get their attention. But if you're going too fast, that is a surefire recipe for a crash. And in fact, that's the exact type of scenario that led to a pedestrian being killed by a bicyclist 3 years ago in Arlington. So passing etiquette is, I forget what I already said. Audible signal as early and as often as possible, and then pass at a speed that is safe and slow enough that you can look out for the other person's safety if something goes wrong. Expect something to go wrong, essentially. Being passed, you're less required to do things, I would say. If you're listening to music, keep it low enough that you can hear. If you are on a trail and you know you're going to be a slow user, stay to the right. If you are at all forced to stop for whatever reason, to look at your phone or take a picture of a bird, step off the trail to do so completely. Or if you are on a bicycle and you want to stop to answer the phone or fix a flat tire, get off the trail to do so. And then the second question was, how do you train yourself to be a bike mechanic, basically? There are professional bike mechanic training opportunities out there. They're not always easy or cheap. The best resource that you have available is YouTube. There are YouTube videos about every type of bike maintenance in the world. But I'm a tinkerer, so if something's wrong on my bicycle, I will work to figure it out. And fair warning, I've broken things and had to go to the shop to get them replaced after the fact. So I've made it worse. But there's no substitute for getting your hands dirty, in my opinion, when it comes to that. Particularly things like the more frequent maintenance is really kind of easy to do. Pumping up your tires, lubing your chain so that it runs smoothly and quietly. even up to maybe adjusting the tension of brake cables. Those are all things that you can do with a YouTube video and a little bit of trial and error. The more complicated stuff, truing a wheel or repacking a hub, or I don't know, swapping out your disc brakes for new rotors or something like that. I mean, you got to know when to say when and just be like, I'm going to pay for someone to do this for me, because you only have so much time.
Do you actually carry a repair kit with you every day on your bike?
Not every day. It depends on what I'm doing that day. If I know I'm going to be out for a while or I'm going to be far from shops, I will often carry my basic kit, which is tire levers, a spare tube, a CO2 injector thingy-majigger, and patch kit, something else. Tire lever, spare tube. Oh, I have a set of latex gloves to keep my hands clean when I do those things. And that all fits because I use the CO2 injector and not a pump. That all fits into a really small bag that I can just pop into and out of whatever bag I'm using that day. So I have like a briefcase that attaches to my rack. I have a backpack sometimes, and so that bag is small enough that I can just move it from place to place whenever I need it to be. If I'm just going to work and back, I don't bother usually, simply because my commute is about 4 miles, and I pass maybe 6 bike shops on that commute. So it's really easy. If there's something that goes wrong, I can usually just pop in and get it taken care of. Also, at my office, we have every tool imaginable and spare parts, and we just accumulate those things. That's pretty unique for Wawa, unfortunately.
So how often does something break? How often do you pop a tire when you are out?
This is just purely anecdotal, but I had a really good stretch of like 2.5 years of no flats, and then I got 3 flats in a month. It can really vary wildly. The things you can control for flat tires in particular, getting really good tires and making sure they're pumped up properly. So there's a bunch of different brands, but every brand of tire has a rolling Kevlar flat-proof line of tires. They're more expensive, usually by $10 or so, but they're worth it. Because they will be puncture resistant. They'll be able to handle rolling over the little bits of safety glass that you encounter in bike lanes all the time without much trouble, or gravel or anything like that. They'll still get taken out by rolling over a nail or a big shard of glass or whatever, but they'll get you out of most situations. Then keep it pumped up to the proper PSI. It's the pounds per square inch, proper inflation pressure for the tire. It's often located on the tire itself, in either PSI, which is 1 unit of measurement, or bars, which is the other unit of measurement. And depending on what that proper pressure is, your tire will lose air at a different rate. So the higher the pressure that is recommended for your tire, the faster they will lose air, just by being around in the world. So if you're riding really firm racing road bike tires, 120 PSI around there, those are going to need to be pumped up every week, if not multiple times per week. If you're riding on mountain bike tires that top out at 50 PSI, you can probably go maybe even 2 weeks without pumping it up. So within that range, even under optimal conditions, you'll be pumping up your tires every other week or so, whether you ride on them or not. So if your bike is sitting around, you still want to check those tires before you ride and pump them back up to the right pressure. Last thing, and this is where I got in trouble, this is what cost me, is when the tire starts to wear out, replace it. Don't ride it down until you see the fibers coming out of the rubber, because a worn tire will definitely pop, or will lead to more flats than a fresh tire. And again, this will vary by the tire itself, but you'll know because when you get it out of the box, it'll have really funky lines throughout it, whether they're crossing or going parallel or whatever. When it's worn, it'll look totally flat black and have no lines whatsoever. And that's when it's time to replace it. That's a good question. Anybody else? All right, awesome. Those were really awesome questions. I wish I'd written them down.
I have a fun one.
Okay, good.
I have a Chihuahua, and I want to bring my Chihuahua with me to work on my bike.
How do you do that?
Basket, bicycle, backpack.
The most common way I see dogs transported is with a trailer. Usually because a lot of the trailers designed for kids, you can seal the trailer. People are really paranoid about dogs leaping off moving bicycles. So depending on how well your your dog is trained, you could keep it in a backpack or in a basket, or I mean, I think it was Wizard of Oz, right, where Toto was in the basket. And so you could do that, but if you're at all concerned, you want something that is going to keep the dog safe from itself, I suppose. And so a trailer designed for children works really well. I think there is actually at least one trailer designed for dogs, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was more of that coming down the pipeline in terms of bike accessories either. All right, that's me. Actually, that's not me. This is not my presentation. That's my colleague, Doug, and his son. He usually does these presentations. He asked me to fill in for him. He's in France. But this email address will be answered by me or by him, so you can't go wrong there. And so you can always reach out to WABA and let us know what you're thinking, or ask any questions, or invite us to your next social gathering, however you want to do it. Thanks again for having me.
You have a business card?
I do. Glad you mentioned that. It's over there in my bag. I'll grab them. All right. Thank you very much.